Recording for progress. Let's come to order. And welcome those attending, staff, as well as the public. Can we establish a quorum, please?
Commissioner Blair Nagus,
Present.
Vice Chair Allen, present. Chair Lowe,
Present.
and Commissioner Atkinson, absent.
Now, did she have comments that she forwarded to you in her absence, or is that not something that we can?
The comments mainly occurs in the Commissioner's present.
Okay. Sounds good. Great. So the first item on the agenda is public comments on items not on the agenda. So do we have any first?
I do not have any cards or items not on the agenda.
Agenda? So the first order of business is to which is over a mile. Is to approve the meetings, the minutes of the special meeting that was held on April 28th, 2025. And Commissioner, did you have any comments on that? Do you have any comments? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
Second. Okay, Commissioner Adams is.
Please, give the initial and then the hearing negative. Thank you. Second. Hey, that was quick. Oh, the other sheet was so quick. Okay, public hearing that the historical commission adopt a resolution removing the property located at 81 Shepherd Drive from the city of Los Altos historic resource inventory and find that the project is exempt from environmental review pursuant to the relevant section of CEQA.
Good evening. Yeah, good evening, commissioners. Looks like screen is almost set up. There's a bit of a lag. There we go. I'm Whitney Whitehill, senior planner, and the item before you this evening is a request to remove the property at 81 Pepper Drive from the Los Altos Historic Resource Inventory. The subject property is a 0.23 acre site with a single family residence constructed in 1929 and a detached garage built circa 1933. In 2008, the property was evaluated as part of a citywide historic resource survey and identified as an example of the colonial revival architectural style in Los Altos. And this determination is documented in the DPR form prepared by Circa, and that's provided as attachment to the staff report. According to the DPR form, the home exhibits character-defining features of the colonial revival style, including a side gable roof form with dormers, 1.5-story massing, and woodlap siding, to name a few. Based on this evaluation, the property was found to be individually eligible for local listing. In January 2025, the owners, James and Afaf Parabash, submitted a request to remove the property from the City of Los Altos Historic Resource Inventory. As part of the request, the owners submitted a historic resource evaluation prepared by Evans and DeShazo. The HRE evaluated the historic significance of the property, including the 3 required criteria for listing in the Los Altos HRI, which are found in the Los Altos Municipal Code. Evans and DeShazo concluded that while the 1929 house and 1933 garage met the age requirements for historic listing, criterion A, the property lacked sufficient integrity in design, workmanship, and feeling, thereby not meeting criterion B, determination of integrity, and is not clearly associated with any significant historical events, people, architecture, or archaeology, thereby not meeting criterion C. Therefore, Evans and DeShazo's HRE found the property meets only one of the 3 criteria required for local historic designation. After receiving the request to remove the property from the HRI, the city hired Page & Turnbull to conduct an independent evaluation and peer review Evans and DeShazo's evaluation as is recommended by the California Office of Historic Preservation. Page and Turnbull's assessment found that the property meets the age criterion A, and unlike Evans and DeShazo, determined that it also meets criterion B, determination of integrity. However, both firms agreed that the property does not meet criterion C, which relates to the historic significance. Therefore, while the two assessments differ on the property's integrity, both ultimately concluded that it does not meet all three required criteria for listing in Los Altos HRI. In conclusion, based on the evaluations conducted by Evans and DeShazo and Page and Turnbull, and the findings and conditions attached to the resolution, staff recommends that the Historical Commission adopt a resolution removing the property at 81 Pepper Drive from the City of Los Altos HRI, and find that the project is exempt from environmental review pursuant to section 15061B3 of the California Environmental Quality Act CEQA guidelines. I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Commissioners, do you have any questions for staff?
Yeah, this is from I'm sorry, the city hired Page.
Page and Turnbull?
Yes, has the city used them previously?
Yes.
What for?
I'm not sure, I guess I'll rephrase, I'm not sure if the city has hired them previously, maybe Stephanie or Nick may be aware of some instances, but we've received numerous reports from them and are familiar with their work.
Do you have any questions? Not at this moment. Okay. Actually, I have a couple questions. You were first curious about the wording on the resolution. And number 2 states that the owners submitted an application to the city of Los Altos requesting that the property be removed from the historic inventory. My question was under the old, prior to any consideration of moving into the zoning arena, from what I could tell, that determination of designation since 1244-090, the only legitimate reason for terminating the declaration of a historic resource or historic landmark is when clear evidence is presented that shows the resource no longer meets the criteria due to loss of integrity and or historic significance, which it sounds like that is the case in this point.
Yeah, the assessments that we received by Evans and DeShazo and Page and Turnbull both concluded that the property does not currently possess, it's not currently meeting those criteria.
Okay, so I guess what I have a question about is whether or not that whereas should be stated as such in that resolution, because it's really not the fact that the owner submitted it that's generating the removal, and in fact, it doesn't, according to the statement, it wouldn't even matter if they did. And so I'm wondering if instead of saying whereas the property owners, if we're looking for what is compelling the resolution, we should use the text from this 1244-090.
So the fourth whereas does sort of touch on that language that you're referring to, termination of designation. I'm wondering if maybe that is getting at your question.
Yeah, I think what read together, that one would be that the property, how we got here was the property owners submitted the application, then there's some whereases, and then it's based on findings of evidence presented, blah, blah, blah. It's no longer eligible.
Okay,
So, yeah, they're both there.
they're both there.
I got here and then how it was concluded.
Okay, so we will be leading to the conclusion that it was the property owner's request that compelled the action.
No, they just initiated the inquiry.
Okay,
Are they requesting because they want to demolish those?
At this point, the item in front of us is just the requested delisting. We don't have a current active application for redevelopment on the site. The owner is here though, I believe, so perhaps they would be wanting to speak to that.
if we have any questions?
No.
Okay, so I'd like to ask if the applicant is present and if they would like to address the commission.
Hello. How are you? I was on the other hall, sitting on the resident windows here. So apologize for the delay.
And you have up to 10 minutes to speak.
The way this project started, we were going to remodel it. And then during the process, we were told that we need to hire a historian to evaluate the house. The first historian we hired was Terranor.
I'm sorry, can you hire yourself for Zoom and for the record, for the recording?
Just for your name.
Your name?
James Parrish.
Okay, that's for the recording.
James Parrish. I'm sorry, my name is I lost it, so I apologize for that. My name is James Parrish. I'm the owner of, me and my wife, we are the owner of 81 Pepper Drive. We purchased it in 2015. And so during the process, was 8-9 months ago, we decided to do some change the deck in the house in the backyard. And when we were taking the deck out, we saw a lot of mouse, a lot of all kind of I mean, it wasn't nice. I don't want to describe it, but anyhow. And then we started taking into the walls. We saw a lot of termite, wood damage, and etc. We took some of what we were about to replace them, which the building department kept stuff by and said, James, you need to come to the city. I said, no problem. We met with Brittany. And Brittany said, you need to hire an historian. To make the story short, we hired Terranor first. And then during the process, Terranor told us, hey, this house is not historic. Why are you even bothering yourself? Okay. That's when I came back to the city and I said, the house is not historic, so what should we do from here? We were told, okay, we need to hire a professional that is qualified to understand the CQA. And so we did, and the response came back, yes, it's not historic. Then we requested that the city need to hire their own professional, which can be Page, and they hired a second person through the city, we paid for it. And they came back to the meeting also, they said the house has no historic value. So from that point, we decided, okay, now that there's no historic value to it, and in remodeled prior our purchase in 2015, a lot of things was changed, which I didn't know. In fact, we were thinking of keeping it, but game changed. And obviously, I value the environment, I value the Los Altos environment and all the homes. In fact, the design I have for the new home, it's well within the environment. And as a comment, this house is too small for me inside to skip it and be everywhere. So that's all I can say. We would like to request to remove it from the historic list.
Do you have questions? You have questions for the applicant? Completely replace the house?
I'm sorry, say that
Let's
again.
have to completely replace the house.
Yes. Because the way it's sitting right at the center of the property, and it really doesn't make sense to, based on that finding from the two historians, there is no value to keep it. So.
Thank you.
Any other question? Where
Um. I'm curious for staff, the original assessment that was done by Serpent? How the ADU been done by that point?
So the Circa assessment was, it was like part of a citywide survey, it was like a windshield survey. I believe it mentioned that a garage existed on the property, but did not go into a lot of detail.
Yeah, I guess I'm curious, but it really isn't germane on how they were able to come to that conclusion. It seems that, me, two other companies did not, but probably doesn't mean. There goes a while back, so potentially things have changed. Okay, I'll open up for are there any public comments on this item. I don't believe I have any comments. Do you have a question?
First, item 293.
Okay, two is considered. Okay, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This item, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I think. For this item, so we are over the limit of 10. Which allows me then to change the time limit from 3 minutes to 2 minutes in the interest of expediency. So I will go ahead and do that. So please let us public. Yes, please, thank you. Permit to 2 minutes. And Ms. Jacobson, which of the items did you want to honor on? Number 3, okay. Okay, got it. So let us begin. I don't have any requests for sequencing, looks like. So Lois Bear, please.
Good evening. I would like to cede my time to John Zaire. I believe you have a card for him as well.
Yes, I do. Okay, Christy Elder.
Thank you so much. Kirsty Elder and my husband and I, Gordon Elder, own the house in 965 Berry Avenue, which is a Salisbury house. We really fell in love with the house. We're both Californians and have lived in California for several generations. And the idea of preserving California history and Los Altos history was very important to us, and it has a lot of meaning. And we are recipients of the Mills Act and are participating, the other people in the group who are understanding that you have this under review. And we would like to have the spirit of preserving homes and history in Los Altos considered strongly by this group and by the city. We hope that moving forward, that the work that you do and that whatever changes you might be making to the Mills Act would have the spirit to encourage preservation, to follow the California state laws, of course, and to encourage people, hopefully, to take part in the Mills Act. It's really allowed us to do a work on our home that it was owned by a California state legislator and
The chair.
Yes.
Is she speaking about item 3?
is that item 3?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm speaking of the wrong item then.
That's okay.
If you come back at 3, so you can
I'll
come
come back
back.
with you then. There we go.
We weren't quite sure which way it's going.
There's some crossover going on.
Okay, exactly.
So,
We're waiting for them.
yeah. Okay, so the public hearing, just to be clear, so the public hearing with regards to 81 Pepper Drive is considered item number 2 on the agenda. The discussion of zoning code amendments as well as Rose Act contracts, that's item number 3. Does anybody else wish to change their cards at this point? Everybody good? Okay, so I will continue with number 2, Alice Menzel, please.
Good evening, everyone. I know I've spoken before you before. I'm with the Preservation Action League of Los Altos. And I think there's been some comments submitted for them on this agenda item. I'd just like to make a point on the record that when you hire a historian for architecture review, very often that historian is most clearly what the people paying for the review want. That doesn't mean these 3 historians did a bad job, but necessarily, but I have some concerns about some of their work product. First of all, colonial revival is something that is reflective of the criteria that is said to be missing. It reflects the American early history. It reflects patriotism. It reflects stability. This was a style that came into great vogue before and after World War II, when people wanted stability, particularly during the Great Depression. That's when it really kicked off. And it was incredibly popular and still is in California. It reflects the spirit of 1776, a reminder of the continuity and stability of the United States. The colonial revival style was the #1 domestic house style in the late 1800s through the 1940s. I don't see that highlighted in any of these 3 reports. It was very fashionable in California. It was very adaptable to a California lifestyle. I could go on at length about this, but I know you've cut the time short. It also was very popular with the federal housing system, with the mortgages coming in, particularly after going after World War II. The federal, the FHA in 1936, the federal style, look at all those, federal things that the FDR's administration built. And it stayed after the same thing. I can say one more sentence, I'm sorry, if we need to keep it to 2 minutes, thank you. But your houses are castles, you do what you want, the windshield survey is broken.
Okay, next would be, Thomas Chapman.
The house is your castle, that windshield survey is broken. That doesn't mean you couldn't be.
Thank you guys for,
That's what I'm about to say.
Okay, can you please step quiet? No, I think so.
thank you, yeah, so I'm talking, specifically with 81 Brooklyn Drive. What I hear from the report that was submitted was that the house really never qualified at all, at least the summary of the report from Page Turnbull, and the owner hired architect, historian, but it did meet the criteria in 2008. Somebody was hired to do a survey and it met the criteria then. So then it becomes a function of cherry picking or finding historians that will read the report that we want. So then we should probably look at if there were any historians that were working on this that would have come to a different conclusion and how that would have been weighed in. Well, there was a gentleman named Bill Pastura, who did a public records request for 81 Pepper Drive, who was commissioned to start writing the report. It's all online, it's all on the public records with less details. He pulled the details for 81 Pepper Drive to begin crafting the report for it, and he ultimately didn't end up finishing the final product. We know that because Mr. Pastura's report isn't on here. So I called him to find out, why he didn't commission the final report. But he couldn't get into the details of why. He did give me the explanation that Thomas, I'm the person that is a historian, and I defer to the expertise of the people that came before me on why something was added to the list. And this is clear and compelling reason that they were improper and it shouldn't have been added to the list. I will not be an individual who will remove an item from the list. So as much as we want to gather the expertise of the 2 reports that were submitted, we should also question which reports weren't submitted, or which historian would have ruled differently, given the same set of circumstances. Well, there was one in 2008 that ruled differently because they added it to the list. So I hope that the committee takes that into consideration when evaluating the list before them. Also, if there are historians that could have had different things.
I just want to clarify that that report is not in this record, so that is some oral testimony, but you don't have a written report to consider, so just bear in mind when you do it later.
Please, John Day, please.
5 minutes, he had seated time. 5. But it said 5 in the,
She was the two.
oh, 2, okay, so no more than 5.
So I am entirely sympathetic to the homeowners of 81 Pepper Drive. Owning a house on the HRI is no easy task. Actually, we own a city landmark, 55 Pepper Drive. And owning that is both a joy and a burden. So I do understand the frustration that the homeowner faced when he was looking to expand his house. And it's unfortunate that his expansion didn't have the proper permits when he tried to push that. I did submit some history about the subdivision, the Adams subdivision, of which our house is the estate house. And it's important because that was not mentioned in the record on the history of the area, the local area, by either consultant. And it's ironic that Page and Turnbull pointed out that under criteria 1, that the consultants, the prior consultants hadn't delved into the local history, and then they never did. And the information is there. The Adams subdivision was actually the first commercial subdivision after the town was formed. There are 5 houses still in existence in that subdivision. 81 Pepper is among them. And so then we get to the criteria, and I understand, we have rules that we have to follow with regard to criteria. And in fact, the Van Epps, they were no better. They weren't anybody important, but because they weren't important, they actually were important. They were the people who helped turn Los Altos from the playground to the rich, where people built fancy houses. Paul Schaupp hardly lived in his house. Lots of other people built fancy houses, but they really were never active members of building a town and a community. And then we had all these people who owned vacation homes, and they were lovely vacation homes, but those people also were not building a community. Literally and figuratively, the Van Epps were part of building a community. There was a carpenter, he built houses. He may have built his house as well. And he was actually as much as part of the story of the growth and transformation of Los Altos as anybody. And I would contend that he is important, and his story is important, and his contribution as a member of the middle class. The middle class, the people who built our community, who became full-time residents, who contributed to the fabric of the community, sending their kids to school. All of those things were really important, because you can't build a community with people who vacation here and people who own fancy houses and spend very little time here. And I would encourage the Historical Commission, if you reviewed my comments, and if you do have questions, if you think there's validity, I would encourage you to take that document and bring it, ask Page and Turnbull to opine upon it. Experts disagree. Experts have opinions. They have it based on as much information they had at the time. They apparently didn't have this information. It's unfortunate. And I hope you would look to make sure that we're making the right decision for the community. I think it's an important asset to the community. It's unfortunate the homeowners want to tear it down. They may discover that there's a deed restriction that they will not be able to build any closer to the property line than it currently exists. And while the city doesn't enforce that deed restriction, people who are part of the neighborhood can in fact do so. And I don't know if that would dissuade them from tearing the house down, but it probably will be a consideration. Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question. Is your point that this, that Mr. X, as you mentioned, should satisfy historic significance for some people,
Yes,
even though the other two have said that they don't.
that's right. And it's based on the fact that they did not, in their narrative about the history of the community, they mentioned nothing about the Adams subdivision. There's 30 acres divided into 50, 60 properties. Mentioned nothing about the evolution of the community, the growth of the middle class in Los Altos, the growth of the community. And I mean, it was a very modest home, but there are a lot of very modest homes in Los Altos that were built. Not everybody lived in the shout house. There are a lot of people who lived in pretty modest homes.
So thank you. I just wanted to clarify that.
Good. Thank you.
Question for staff. We're considering a historic property. How does, as Mr. Bear was pointing out, my understanding of the DPR is that it references one specific house, not a community, and whether or not, and that if you wanted to look for historic destination of a community or an area or a tract, then you would not do the historical ordinance or historical determination for a house. You would have to do one for a larger scope project. Is that true?
I think what you're referring to in the historic districts,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
that you would look at the districts.
Okay. And so in this case, in these cases, we're purely looking at the house itself and how it fit in, and not as much how it fit into the larger community, but the house as it exists itself. Okay, I wanted to clarify that. Thank you. Okay. So I'm going to close the public comment period. And I would like to begin deliberations by the commission. And so I'll ask if either of the other commissioners have thoughts on this proposal. And maybe a reminder too of what we're being asked to do. And we're being asked to compile a recommendation that the property located at Pepper Drive be removed from the HRI. And then that information will then, our recommendation will then go to council, who will then make the final decision, or
Your decision would be.
it's our decision totally does not go to council. Okay, thank you.
I'm quite worried about sort of the slippery slope of, you know, like how your house is and you find a way to remove it and have it demolished. I worry about that.
Oh, yeah, no comment.
Okay. I hear the slippery slope. And I hear that. I think there's compelling information though, at this point where you have two, very well known, very well regarded, historians coming to the same conclusion, a little bit different in the specifics, but it is in the end the same conclusion. So that would be my input to the. Okay, after community the chair will facilitate discussion, if necessary, to establish a consensus. Do I have a motion?
To the chair, I want to clarify too, The commission is comprised of 5 members, even though there are only 4, and a majority is 3. So if in order for the motion to pass, you would need to have 3,
All three would have to.
Yeah.
you would have to vote.
And there's a new rule too, if it's a 5-member commission, but only 4 are currently seated, then it's 4 members, but you still get to 3.
3, you still get to 3.
Yeah,
Just want to make sure you're aware.
Okay,
thank you, Sean.
so before I call then a motion, which would require all 3 yays to pass. Should we discuss? Are you, interested in voting no on this? Do you feel strongly enough about it? Sorry, I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah. I sort of feel like I need more time to think about this because, you know, we got the packet, but very late last week, as far as I could tell, and it's very dense and there's a lot to consider.
So that would then compel you to vote now.
That's fine.
Okay. Go ahead, Ethan.
I, on the other hand, don't see a position to legislate, especially minister. And so I tend to go with the appeal for reclassification. That is to say that I'm going to say yes to the application.
I want to, because this topic has come up several times in the reading the massive quantities of input to this. That the agenda and the packet were published in the time frame required by the law, yes?
72 hours in advance.
72 hours,
Need to be published by 6 p.m. on Thursday.
which it was, I'm sorry. So, okay, it's really clarify that, because.
Friday, I'm sorry. They published on Thursday.
And I want to clarify, so tonight is a special meeting because the lack of quorum that the commission was going to be able to establish for next week's regular scheduled meeting. So actually only a 24-hour notice is legally required for us to have to post the agenda and make it available to the commission and the public. So technically this item for tonight's meeting has been essentially made available earlier than legally required.
Well, I just want to push back a little bit. The amount of material that is pushed out is also relevant. The fact that we're given such a short notice for that amount of material, it's really not in the spirit of its function.
And there's no remedy to that, so I understand.
No.
No.
I mean, I might as well give 10,000 pages.
Okay, so it appears that we have the potential of 2 yays and a nay. Staff, what are the options then if it does not pass? Then as this commissioner was asking for more time, is it a matter of trying to continue it until we have more time to consider, or what would be the options with that?
I mean, I think you could continue it to the next meeting where you have your 4 members present, so all 4 members present, and see if you can achieve quorum at that point. And you may have additional time based on the information you have now available to you to read through the documentation.
Would that be satisfactory? Okay, we'd like to go ahead and then continue this
That will take a motion
motion.
and 3.
Are we continuing with the
Jake,
start
second.
of the next regular scheduled meeting?
Next regular meeting.
Yeah. So it'd be a motion to continue until the next meeting. Which is, will be in October, yes?
It's the 4th Monday in October.
Fourth Monday in October.
The 27th. October 27th.
Would you like information? Yes, I motion to respond to that, so is that not word?
Continue.
Continue to continue to the next meeting, which is the fourth Monday in October. October 27th. Okay, got a second?
Second.
All in favor, let's do a roll call vote. We'll do roll calls on that.
Commissioner McGuire Nagus.
Yeah.
Vice Chair Adams
Yes.
and Chair Cobb.
So this item was continued to a date certain, so there will be no additional public notice on this.
Okay, no additional public notice, will there be opportunity for public comment?
Oh, yeah, at the next meeting.
At the next
We
meeting?
just don't, the applicant won't have to send out and pay for an additional notice.
Okay, great. But it will go into the minutes that are published in 72 hours, right? Yeah, okay. Perfect. Okay. That takes care of agenda item number 2. And we move on to agenda item number 3. Let me get my staff of papers organized here. So I can. Okay. So the third item is to review and comment. Oh, yeah. Review and comments on a proposed zoning code amendment for historic preservation and Mills Act contract. So that is 2 items that we've been requested to review and comment on. So I would like a staff report.
Yes, good evening, historical commissioners. So tonight we will review, the draft ordinances, for, historic preservation and also for, the establishment of, a Mills Act ordinance, for the city. One of the, main components of the, amendments that are proposed is, relocating, the historic preservation ordinance, which is currently contained in the building code, to the zoning code. So tonight, the historical commission meeting, just to kind of cover some bases based on public comment that was received prior to the meeting, is that the historical commission meeting, for August 18th, is, in July, we were made aware that, there would not be, potential for a quorum, at next week's regular scheduled meeting, so that did necessitate to do, essentially the 3rd meeting of the year as a special meeting date, because of that lack of quorum. The agenda was published on August 14th, close to 96 hours, ahead of schedule, and then the agenda notice was posted on August 15th at 5 p.m., 72 hours in advance. Those are still, ahead of schedule because, pursuant to the Brown Act, a special meeting notice and agenda must be posted 24 hours in advance. As we previously discussed in the, prior, item this evening. So the historic preservation ordinance, as I've kind of already, mentioned, is that the existing, ordinance is located in Title 12, or the building and construction, section of the municipal code. The relocation from Title 12 to Title 14, is predominantly a reorganization, and the contents have largely remained, the same and unchanged. Clarifying language, though, has been included into the draft language because of, kind of some conflicting terms, or, some of the kind of gray between who is the reviewer or what is the difference between an advisory, review, so on and so forth. So the, proposed amendments, essentially will provide clarity throughout the, historic preservation ordinance, provide requirements for when the historic alteration permit is, explicitly required, and then also further establishes, clarity in the preservation review processes that are established by ordinance. So it's a little bit smaller on the screen, but what this does depict is that, the compare and contrast between the, 2 ordinances, because again, this is removing it from one entire title, and moving it into another. So, for all intents and purposes, a traditional red line would not be the same because it would be a red line of the entire section. And then an underline of everything brand new because you're moving it, and that's how, when you go to a codifier, that's what they would expect to legally be able to actually do that amendment. So that being said is, All main provisions of the existing ordinance, which are identified in the first column, are being retained. They're just essentially being renumbered, and reorganized to make sure that the structure of the actual ordinance flows so that you actually know what new section is essentially supposed to relate to the other sections or the other provisions in that portion of the chapter. Specifically, there is not a small subsection that talks about the identification of a historic resource explicitly in the code that has now been included, as well as joint meeting procedures for when there are joint meetings that are possible. For example, we have potential design review applications that would then have to go to either the zoning administrator or the planning commission. We also could potentially deal with a subdivision. We previously had design review and a subdivision and a historic alteration permit that had to go to 3 different levels of the bodies. So to be able to kind of help create some consistency with the review authority so that each independent body is hearing kind of from the horse's mouth, so to speak, what each individual body is thinking or saying and not being lost in translation. That's why it's important to have some basic characteristics of what a joint meeting procedure actually includes. Jumping now to the Mills Act program. So kind of as an overview is that the Mills Act was created in 1972. And it grants participating authorities the ability to enter into contracts with owners of qualified historic properties. The city of Los Altos has never enacted its own independent Mills Act program ordinance. So it leaves everything to kind of the very long components of state law, which also is not organized very well, or sometimes the terms are a little bit outdated. So it kind of behooves us to have something locally for folks to be able to rely on. The city started to enter into Mills Act contracts in the 1990s, and since then have entered into 17. The proposed ordinance does provide regulations and guidance on the administration of the Mills Act program, and provides consistent guidelines that are consistent with OHP, which is the Office of Historic Preservation at the state level. So to kind of further just kind of clarify what the Mills Act program is, just so that we know what we're talking about, is that it allows contracts with owners of qualified historic properties who actively participate in restoration and maintenance of their historic property while receiving a property tax relief. The contracts are for initial 10 years and they automatically renew annually for another 10 years essentially. So you'll always have 10 years on the clock. Unless the agency or the property owner requests a cancellation or there's a notice of non-renewal. There's 2 different terms that effectively are utilized similarly. However, they are different in how or why you would utilize one or the other. But at the end of the day, there's always going to be 10 years left on the clock as a part of the Mills Act. This is some guidances that the Santa Clara County Office of the Assessor states that the savings do vary depending on when the property was last essentially turned over. So the property tax relief could be anywhere from 20 to 70%, again, depending on age, condition, so on and so forth. But the contracts then do require ongoing maintenance, potential improvements if something has become somewhat dilapidated or beyond repair to necessitate the rehabilitation of the properties. Just as a quick overview, the Mills Act program ordinance provides all of these 15 kind of subsections, which is the authority to adopt, the purpose and applicability, definitions, limitations on historic property contracts, required provisions of the historic property contracts, application for a historic contract, the fees, eligibility criteria, review of applications, reportation of the approved contracts, review of approved contracts, non-renewal of contracts, amendments to contracts and cancellation, and then also public hearing requirements.
Was all this material in the state
So the majority of this, yes, there is, there are public comments as I look, I'm sure you will hear from, speakers tonight that, do not believe that some of these are, what they are, but this is what the, city staff and city attorney believe is within what's, the requirements based on state law, yes. So the ordinance process and development, so the draft ordinances, were, originally began drafting in April, earlier this year. After we had already done some pretty extensive, review and analysis of OHB's guidelines, as well as reviewing multiple Bay Area historic preservation ordinances. So we kind of have been spending a little bit of time on both the Mills Act as well as historic preservation. The planning commission did review this item, in June earlier this year. And then, myself as well as the city manager met with a group of 4 residents, earlier this month, to discuss some of the concerns that were identified and also included in public comment. Tonight, obviously, we're here for the historic commission's review. So again, the city manager and myself, both met with a group of 4 residents to discuss questions and comments of the proposed ordinances. A written letter was received summarizing those, provisions. 3 of the items were included and are identified in blue underline, in the draft ordinances. However, there was 24 additional items, and they were not incorporated because they were either determined to be in conflict with state law or they are preferences rather than requirements, based on staff's professional recommendations.
I assume that the 4 residents of you were all notes contractor.
We were not. 3 were, 1 was not.
Oh.
So to just kind of further cover is general plan compliance. So the city's general plan was last amended, and adopted in November of 2002. This is the one and only goal, and sub-policy, for historic preservation that's contained within the general plan. There are 2 other sub-policies, but they're just basic, needs to have an ordinance, needs to enforce the ordinance, as policies. So this is the one and only reference. Based on the goal to preserve and enhance selected historic and cultural structures and resources within the community, we would find this draft ordinances to both be in full compliance with the Los Altos general plan as adopted. Additionally, there's been comments of the certified local government or the CLG program, and assertions that the city is not compliant with the CLG and our requirements under such ordinance. Or program participation. The requirements of the CLG are outlined, this is actually from the CLG website, is to enforce appropriate state and local laws and regulations for the designation and protection of historic properties, which I believe our existing ordinance as well as this one does. Establish a historic preservation review commission by local ordinance. That is you folks, as well as the ordinance that enacts to give you the review authority. Maintain a system for survey and inventory of historic properties. The item that was just before you, before this item, is a proxy of that survey or an inventory and an action of the city to be able to maintain or modify that survey and inventory. In addition to other actions that we would maybe take in the future with considering additional designations. Provide for public participation in local preservation program. That is by proxy of actually having a historical commission and having 4 times a year meetings to be able to have the local inclusion and participation of the public. And satisfactory performance responsibilities delegated to us by the state. We have been in full compliance as we submit our annual responses for CLG. And are in full compliance with the CLG program. Additionally, there's been the assertion that the ordinances before you do not comply with CEQA. However, they do, and this action is applicable under the common sense exception. That is not necessarily under this commission's purview, as that's a matter of zoning as well as a final action of the council. So that will be something that is further essentially ridiculed as a process of going through an ordinance adoption. However, one things that I will point out is any further action that is conducted on a property by property basis does require additional CEQA analysis, which is usually one of the reasons why the majority of ordinances that are adopted for a zoning code do not trigger in-depth CEQA analysis, is because that's not the actual physical modification that is ended up triggering. It's actually the language that then necessitates it in the future. So tonight, what we are here to do, as the chair started us off with, is that pursuant to section 2.12.030, the Historical Commission will provide review and comment upon the existing or proposed ordinances, plans, and policies for the city as it relates to historic resources.
Great, thank you. I have a couple questions, and my goal here with these questions is that I want to be crystal clear to all concerned about what the Historical Commission is being asked to do here in this venue, and what the results of the discussion this evening will end up with. And so if you pardon me, the ability to do that. So just to make sure that we're on the same page. So the city, in terms of the development committee, and has decided to create an ordinance. They want to establish a new ordinance. Okay. And in doing that, they want to relocate a section of code from one area to another, building to zoning. And then they also want to incorporate more state language into the code involving the NERAS Act. And so the Historical Commission in and of itself does not weigh in on the appropriate of that or the content of that. Is that true?
Content is what you're here to review and comment on, if you had. Really the location, I mean, will inevitably be kind of the direction of where it should be located. When the council reviews it, inevitably for their legislative kind of final action. But you could, if you had commentary on the location, if you thought that it, if we were putting this in, let's say, Title 11, which is miscellaneous property regulations, which is where gas fire roof blower regulations are. Not sure why we would put it there, but the reason for explanation purposes is why it obviously kind of somewhat almost is akin and belongs to zoning, is again a design review application that is frequently in tandem with a historic alteration or consideration. It's kind of the closest thing that actually would make sense. So instead of keeping it buried in the building code, where it's always been, it makes more sense for the kind of user of each individual text.
Okay, and so then the city has decided they want to try to do this ordinance change. Technically, it is not required by law for the Historical Commission to approve that.
That's correct. So the ordinance is been drafted to be included into the zoning code, which state planning and zoning law require that action to go to the quasi-judicial body, which is the planning commission itself, and then to go to the legislative body of the city council for final review and adoption.
Okay, and so then the Historical Commission, because these matters involve the Historical Commission, is being asked to quote unquote review and comment.
Correct.
Solely. Okay. And review and comment. So we are not providing recommendations. Is that true?
So it's a part of your ability is to provide comment, so that if it was something, obviously your review and comment will be provided to the council. And if the council so chooses to have that integrated into the final draft ordinance, they would direct that, yes.
Okay, and the comments of the public will be folded into that by virtue of the fact that this is it's being it'll be in the minutes.
Correct.
Okay, so really what comes out of this meeting is a set of comments, of both the public and the historical, commission. And we will not be having a vote, we will not be having a motion, we will not be doing anything, that we are approving, or we are not signaling or stating that we are approving anything, we are purely commenting.
Correct, so it's essentially a public forum, and a formal process, and a public review of the draft and essentially, active, discussion about what the draft ordinance includes.
Okay. Because there wasn't a lot of the input from the public, there's a lot of discussion about whether or not this is legal, whether or not that's legal, this kind of. And I want to make clear that it's not the role of the historical commission to either approve that or not. That we're here at this point to take information and then put that as part of a compilation into what then goes forward to the city.
That's correct, and then, I mean, the city attorney obviously does not normally come to your, meetings. But I think Joey Houston has reviewed the draft ordinances for compliance with state, planning and zoning law, as well as the, historic, requirements of state law. So, I mean, it is legally compliant.
Okay. Do you guys have comments on this initial part of the agenda report?
I want to agree that we're not a legislative body.
Thank you. I think we're also. So great, let me see. So in this case, there is no applicant, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, before, I have a couple specific questions on the agenda report, and let me just go over that briefly. Page 2, in the second paragraph, under background, kind of toward the latitude, there says much of the proposed ordinance language is consent with existing standards. Is that supposed to be consistent? Okay, I didn't know if it was a legal term. I didn't understand. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was in. Okay. And so we're clear about what it is we're reviewing. Okay, and I just wanted to note for the record, it states in here that ordinances contained within the zoning code are not legally required to be reviewed by any commission. However, we're not under zoning code right now. We're still under housing code. Yes. Building.
Building chapter.
Okay.
Building, so yeah, so the item that you just reviewed before this, for the delisting, it was contained within Title 12.
Okay.
So yeah, so ordinances and amendments to, Title 14 do not require review other than by the planning commission.
Okay. That was my understanding. And so, thank you to the city for agendizing this item and allowing us, and the public to review and comment. So you didn't have to, so I'm going to acknowledge that happened. Right. So there's, point of order, we kind of have three separate things here. We have, potentially comments on this statement, the report by the city. And then we have two separate ordinances to consider, one on relocation to the zoning and then the incorporation of the state. And I'm wondering if we should address those separately, kind of do a 1, 2, 3 thing, versus trying to block them all together. It's gonna get really confusing. Specifically with the breadth of the comments I know that are important to the public. So I'll go ahead and do that. Does, does the public have any comments on the, on staff's report?
Submitted our coming proposal.
Okay, but you submitted them, right, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna divide these up. And I would like to have comments specifically on the first ordinance, so that's the historic alteration permit process. I'd like to have those people who wish to comment on that, come up first, and then we'll, take comments on the Mills Act proposal. I don't want to conflate the two, because otherwise that's gonna get really confusing. And probably take forever. So, that's my plan.
And people can walk on both subjects.
Yes, there'll be different times.
And that will be 2 minutes for each to get 2 minutes each side.
Student furnish, yeah. Exactly. Okay, since we have no comments on, the staff report, and commissioners do not have any comments on that, then, I'll close the comment period on the staff report. And there's no deliberations, since there's no vote, no approval or anything. But it was noted that we have had our review and comments on the staff report. Okay. So next, I would like to, ask if staff has any questions on the, what we received in terms of the ordinance to define a new historic alteration process. Did you have any on that, on the first part? No, did you? Okay. As usual, I read. Sorry. On page 132, 1490-040, designation criteria, point number 2. I'm a little bit uncomfortable with the word most. And it says, retain sufficient and perfect historic integrity in the most of the following areas. Is most, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if we had 3 and 3, it would negate that determination, yes. We would need to have 4 and 2. Approved. Okay, and I don't know, I'm sorry. And I don't know if that needs to be stipulated or not in that language. Most just seemed a little bit ambiguous. And on page 134. On the subject of designation repeal or amendment. The old language, was what I had previously read about. The only legitimate reason for terminating the designation is when clear evidence is presented that. And it looks like that clause is no longer was removed or not stated, but was replaced with designation may be repealed or amended in the same manner and procedure as was followed to designate the property initially. It shall result from new information, discovery of early misinformation or change of original circumstances. So we've kind of done a switch there of that language into this new language.
So, the way, so anything that occurs in zoning, the action that does it has to undo it. So that's why it says the designation may be appealed or amended in the same manner, and procedure that was followed, so that's why it says that. But then, yes, it does talk about is that if there is new information, or the discovery of, earlier misinformation, which I think helps to provide versus the very subjective, quote, when clear evidence is presented to show that the resource, and then kind of goes on to talk about the criteria due to loss of integrity. But it doesn't really kind of talk about what's the actual reason why there would be like a loss of integrity or there's misinformation. It's really just kind of saying maybe, realistically, the way termination of a designation would kind of only result is like if people have been slowly chipping away at modifying the structure over time and eventually you end up having like one of the Jogini houses in Southern California that's been added on to 40 times and then it ends up being a massive structure that's not really the same.
Okay, so in order to undo a designation, we'd go back to B, which is the initiation of designation, which says that it can be initiated by owners, the historical commission, and the Fernbite Council, as well as city council. So it would have to be one of those three, then that would initiate undoing or the undesignation.
And then it goes actually through the whole process.
Right,
So,
so I'm,
so for example, tonight, there's no real, kind of solidified like delisting for like the action item before.
right.
It falls mute to that. So there's things that are missing from the historic preservation ordinance, which is furthering kind of cleaning up kind of the errors or the vacant kind of regulations.
Okay, yeah, I want to clarify that since we've just been through that with this one. And also, so as a result, so the historic, HAP. Historic. AP, I'm losing my acronym.
Which means the office of.
So the agendization of the HAP, it's been moved from a regular historic commission meeting to a joint meeting instead. Is that, the only way, and historic alteration proposal.
Yeah.
I know. So if somebody has an HAP, then we won't be holding a special history, or it will not be agendized as part of a normal historical commission meeting, but it will be a joint meeting instead.
Only if it has like a dual application, so like something with a subdivision, or design review. So that's the only time that you would see a joint meeting, occur.
Okay. So if you're taking that, then it would just come to the historical commission as normal.
Correct.
Right. So, Steven, did you have any comments that you wanted to? Okay. So then, we will open up the item for public comments, and as we talked about earlier, 2, 3, so I'll go through the list, and if you want to comment specifically on these 2 items, which is moving, the current wording from housing into zoning, and the other issue, which is incorporating Mills Act language into the city code, then
Are we taking them separately?
we're taking this and then we'll do Mills Act next.
Yeah.
We're going to receive.
Yeah, we're just doing the historic preservation.
Sorry, yes, I see what you're saying. So 2 in a row, oh boy. So, as a comment in, if you want to hold off until we get into the Mills Act, please let me know. And I'll hold your card for later. If you want to speak specifically on this migration and addition into code, then this will be the time to do public comment for that. Okay? So Redwood, okay, got it. Christy Elder,
Next.
Ross. So yes.
Yes.
Okay. Jennifer Jacobson?
Oh,
No? Ooh, Moses has got a lot of left. John, there.
On this one as well as the notes.
Okay. Lois there.
I would like to address this one, but I would like to cede my time to John Bear.
Okay, but he's speaking, so John, you're gonna speak on both,
Right.
and she,
Also, senior.
okay,
4 minutes ago.
okay. Allison is on,
Pablo.
vote, okay. Dan Sveisel,
No.
no? Kurt Ripple,
No.
no? Duco has moved,
No.
Mills. Acorn at
Yes, Mills,
Bacon,
Mills, please.
Mills. Sorry, I had the wrong side of the bar. No,
Okay.
okay.
I think there's one more person.
Hmm?
I think there's one more person.
Okay. Do you want to comment on this item or the Mills Act?
Mills.
Okay. Okay, Alice?
Hello again. I'd like to ask you to remind me exactly what was the first one. First one on the topic.
Historic ordinance.
Just want to be sure I'm clear. I'd like to speak as someone who has extensive experience as an attorney with these kinds of historic ordinances and the review procedures. I got involved back in the late 1990s as an attorney when Palo Alto did a windshield survey. That is, you can drive by people's houses and saying, well, that one looks 50 years old, that one looks 50 years old, and made a huge list. And it was like a nuclear bomb went off in town. I ended up representing a lot of homeowners at the historic commission there. It was very ugly, it was very nasty. City council, the commissioners just wanted to follow the experts. And it ended up on a ballot. And the homeowners wanted to say, you can't just do a windshield survey and tangle up our property. It was a lot of work, and I don't want to see that happen here in Los Altos. There is a legal issue on the notice for this. It was not pointed out that the city council, the city staff, when they decided to make this a special meeting, they had already blown the deadline to put a special meeting or this kind of thing in the crier. So they had to do a special notice printed by the Palo Alto Daily Post that printed tomorrow's date, not today's. That is a material problem that I would urge you to continue this whole thing over. Secondly, when people say that this streamlines and simplifies things, it really doesn't. And I could speak for hours on these two topics, but just this is another reason to continue this, because by some of these mechanisms of this ordinance will make it so that there won't be as many layers for people who are aggrieved with the decision that it's made by the historic council or whatever, with a full airing, with lots of time to go through, instead of like doing the idea of doing a joint historic commission meeting with the planning commission, where you have two different things, is very troublesome.
Did you want to speak?
So this item is not a public hearing item, so there is no legal notice to be published in the newspaper. So the reference to the air that was published for a public hearing notice would have been for 81 Pepper Drive.
Okay. Okay, John, yeah. And you have four.
Well, on those in advance, I've added to your burden of material, and hopefully some of it is adds to the clarification and hopefully brings to light some of the important issues that hopefully you will have some input on. I think it's really good that we try and clarify and simplify. But I think it's also very important we don't lose one of the essential tenets of this town, which is that we are able to get the public involved and noticed, and that we allow that process to happen. And there are some changes here that impede that goal. Residents are not allowed to nominate something to the HRI. Would be good, given the fact that we haven't updated the HRI in 25 years, that we allow that. With regard to joint meetings, where a homeowner wants a joint meeting between historical and planning, go for it. But where they don't, I think they should have that option. Historical commission meetings are more informal and really get more in depth around the issues. Planning commission meetings are far more rigid. And when you hold them as a joint session, we've done that at least once in the most recent past. Frankly, the historical commission gets short shrift. And I don't think that's fair to the public. I don't think it's fair to you. On the other hand, when it's a city or commercial property, I think they should be separate meetings. The issues tend to be more complex. And again, it allows the commission, allows the public more opportunity to really delve into the issues, to get the questions and issues addressed. The appeal process only allows for people within a 300-foot radius. And that is a byproduct of moving some of these things around. And particularly when you have public facilities, public properties, I think it's more than the people who live within 300 feet of the property. If you make changes to something that's really a community resource, it's really, again, we owe it to the community to adequately notice the community. Finally, the definition of historic properties has been narrowed in the draft ordinances. And again, I think that does not serve the community well. And again, all of those are included in my, with apologies, overly long email to you. But hopefully you've had an opportunity to read those as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so that comes to the end of the public comment period on the initial issue of relocating from the building code to the zoning code. Yes.
I was just discussing this with, the assistant city manager. If you have questions on the comments on the historic ordinance at this time, maybe you should ask us or staff at this time before you move on, so we're not cross-pollinating the discussion. So do you have any questions on anything that was said about the historic ordinance? Changes or recommendations? You all?
This might be going backwards. How do you find 4 residents?
They reached out to the city manager directly
Oh.
after this had already been, heard at the planning commission.
That's for the Mills Act, right?
It was for both.
Oh, it's for both, oh, okay.
And I guess my only questions are that, in Ms. Manzel's comment, she's taking issue and believes that she mentioned the continuance of this, and so it's my understanding is that as part of our review and comment, continuances, and we can't continue a comment. Is that true, or review and a comment? If we were to vote on something, then we definitely could continue it.
Yes, but the comment was about a public, noticing error, which is not accurate. So
Okay.
I don't know what the continuance would be based on.
Okay, and then Mr. Brewer's comments about the substance of what is actually in the historical documents aren't as much about their move, it's about their substance, right? And
Yes, that's correct. However, one things that I would kind of point out is that the notification of moving, essentially anything that requires a public meeting, or like a formal action to be taken right now requires under the existing code 2 adjoining property owners on each side, 3 adjoining in the rear, and 5 adjoining across the street. So what I just said is there's only 10 people that get noticed when an action comes before this commission. And it going into the zoning code actually now expands it into a 300-foot radius of anything within edge to edge of the property.
Okay.
So it actually expands the public notification area, which is actually the inherent standard 300-foot distance for public notifications under planning and zoning law in the state of California. So the appeal process is something that the council just established less than a year ago. So I would say that that's inherent of what the existing seated council has just taken action on. The residents not nominating for HRI, that would be a very bigger, robust discussion as I've reviewed the Office of Historic Preservation's guidelines on a specific topic, as well as the attorney that authored a letter that came to the commission today. There's 2 things that are a potential consideration, is if we were to include something like that, which would be an inverse condemnation claim against the city, as well as a takings clause, which is a violation of the United States Constitution. So those 2 things are significant issues that if we're talking about legal compliance, it's a bigger conversation to change it to a random person in the community wanting to neighbor or nominate their neighbor's house, and then essentially for the foreseeable future now limiting anything that can be modified or changed to that structure in the future. So those are some significant issues that we would have. The historic properties definition, I would need to look at a little bit more specifically to see what had been there.
Okay, in terms of comments specifically to the idea of the moving of that code into zoning, I don't believe there are comments at this point. We do not have any, correct? And the public hasn't expressed any specifically on that issue. So that completes our obligation with respect to that, that issue. And let's move on to Mills Act, Lily's favorite. So the staff like to, I guess I would, no, I guess I don't. So the subject of is the incorporation of Mills Act specific to the city into city code. Yes. So if staff would like to. Did you want to?
We reviewed what you just said.
So do you have additional reported or comments specifically on Mills Act?
No, not until after the public comment.
Okay. And there is no applicants. Do any of the commissioners have questions specifically about the Mills Act? The inclusion of the Mills Act verbiage into the city code. Okay, comment on. Yes. No comment. Okay. Well, and this is purely semantical. I was looking at, so the new section would be 14.91, and someone was looking at the code and it said 14.91 is lighting standards. Is that? Did I not read that correctly?
Yeah, that's actually a newer one that must have just became operative. So in the code, because it sometimes takes 3 to 6 months to actually get put into it. So we would just renumber the ordinances to be kind of the next sequence.
I just wanted to clarify that. Okay, let us move on to other comments. I'm just gonna kind of go in random order here. Yes,
Yes, because part of the work we did, had the opportunity to speak first, and then there was anything as you'd like.
okay. So are there any of these other speakers from this so-called gang of 14? Yeah.
Is there anybody who's not part of the government?
Does anybody know what the gang of 14 is? I had tried to have it. Yeah. I think.
My wife is 16, but right? Well, I'm John Bear. John, you might know me, because some of us have a seat time. I'm sorry, no, me, because some of us have a seat time to live. I'm going to see time too. Yes, thank you. Yes, please.
So you can only receive seating time of one more individual. The city has adopted a code that requires a maximum of 5 minutes per speaker.
Go ahead, okay. I've got 5 minutes, you guys seating the side to me, okay. So I'm John Bear, my wife and I own City Landmark number 1, we've been Mills Act property owner since 1997. I'm part of what we call farming, we used to call the gang of 14, we just had one more member today. So we're now the gang of 15. 15 of the 17 Mills Act property owners have joined together. We are all deeply interested in historic preservation, committed to it by the work that we have done on our homes, very interested in ensuring that the city continue to encourage historic preservation and make sure that what is in Mills Act meets both the needs of the Mills Act property owners, but also allows the city to effectively manage and enforce that process. So I'm here not as an advocate or anybody, I'm here for an advocate as a member of the group and an advocate for historic preservation. I'm delighted that we have 2 members of city council and our city attorney here. And if I'd known, I would have sold tickets to tonight's event. So we received again another very long email from me. We've received emails from other people in our group as well. There's been a lot of discussion. There's been a lot of discussion with city staff. Nick and Gabe have been wonderful in terms of listening to us, giving us the opportunity to raise issues and concerns. We don't always agree, and that's okay. Ultimately, they get to decide, but we push back a little bit when we can, and that's hopefully they can respect that as well. There's been a lot of ongoing discussion. We've made a fair amount of progress. Frankly, there's more progress to be made, as evidenced by the fact that there still are a number of outstanding issues. As recently as this afternoon, I had a discussion with the city manager. Nick would have been involved, but we couldn't get everybody together at the same time. And he's committed to me that he's willing to work, and he and Nick are willing to work with us to continue to address those issues, to make sure that we come up with something that works for everybody. That's critical. I embrace the spirit in which that has been offered. We do want it to work. There's a lot of minutia here, and I'm not going to delve into the minutia at this meeting. That doesn't serve any good purpose. Suffice it to say, there are a lot of things that seem small but can be big. As a property owner who's lived with Mills Act for 27, 28 years now, it hasn't worked as well as it can. It can work better, and I'd like to see it work better. I'd like to see all the processes work better. I'd like to see the city do a better job of making sure that historic properties, in fact, are preserved. I do have one request, however. While the Historical Commission is only advisory in this role. I would like to encourage the Historic Commission to ask after Nick and Dave and I and several other select members of our group have met and worked through the changes, that the city staff has the opportunity to present those revisions to the Historical Commission. I think it's useful for you. I think it's useful to the community before it goes to the city council. As we say, another bite at the apple. Because, I think this is a process where more interested people involved and only make it better. And that's our sincere goal. And just, by the way, the 15 Millsack property owners, these are owners of some of the most iconic, oldest homes in our town. So the people here, and many of them will also speak tonight, are interested, they're involved, they're committed. And I hope you appreciate that commitment and what they have to say. So thank you very much.
I have a question. Do you have a comment on whether Millsack language should be incorporated into the city code at all? Or is your issue mostly with what the substance about it?
It has to do with the substance. It's making sure that the substance really works. I'll give you an example. We roofed. It's one of the problems of owning a house for 27, 28 years. You get to do the same work over again. We hired a roofer, we picked out roof shingles that was almost identical, and he went to pull a permit, and he was told he couldn't pull a permit online. Turns out, much to my surprise, much to his surprise, it required the city staff to review and approve it. Okay, and just that clarification would have helped to set our expectations, and again, be a better tool of communication so people are surprised, so that they can do the things that are important, but there is enough notification and enough time. So again, it's not a right or wrong on a lot of this stuff. It's really more finding ways to work homeowners with the city so that we get the desired outcome. Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Joyce, do you have any comments on those comments?
No, so the re-roof and certain things are some stuff that we would put into like FAQs in order to inform people when certain properties are essentially required to take another step. We can't just go through the online permitting process in order to potentially modify a historic resource essentially. So, there's certain things that we would need to tie in, to have people be able to have that information.
Hey, Alex Smith, promise, actually, as part of the comments, everybody, since I would like to have your comment on the basic question of whether or not you comment about the actual migration or incorporation of the Millsack language into city code. But since that's the question that we're trying to, and so I appreciate a comment on that very question. If then you want to go into other things within your 2-minute line, great. Okay. So,
Thank you. So the Mills Act. I got involved in this many decades ago when twice I was personally involved as a lawyer with the Merriman House, 2 different past owners who were doing some remodeling. So I had to get up to speed fast on Mills Act. It can be very complicated, particularly when you add in subjective things like, oh, what kind of procedures there are, or what kind of tiles to be allowed to be used. And when you get subjective, you have a lot of different opinions, which means there needs to be a lot of discussion and a lot of very good transparency. And a lot of people, whether they're homeowners or city staffs, they might think they know what the law says, but there's sometimes different interpretations or they got it wrong because it can be very complex. Again, a lot of it's subjective. Now I'm going to put on my admin hat that I have, because last year I joined the Daughters of the American Revolution. And they were started after the Civil War to try to ease over bad feelings at the end of the Civil War by trying to bring back the spirit of 1776 to remind people why we have a country, what we fought for. One of the things we fought for was our Bill of Rights. That has a right to petition. That is a right by the humans, the individuals. It is not a privilege to be granted by any government entity. So when I hear these Mozart owners saying, well, they have 3 people who reached out and got a hearing with the city staff, and now they've got 15, now 16, they have not. To me, those are the experts that need to be listened to most before you touch anything affecting the Mills Act and our code. And until you do that, you're gonna have people who are very upset, who will gum up all the works as much as possible, or get run over and running up costs like poor Mr. Bear, who, had to run around with extra costs delaying a roofing job. So again, I urge you to continue this one by Gavin. Thank you.
Let me just clarify really quickly. So since the Mills Act is not in our code, the city code, when all the work up to this point that has involved Mills Act actions are based on state code. Yes.
That's correct.
Alright.
So the ordinance though would help to further clarify and to make consistent future kind of review of Mills Act contracts, because to the public speaker's point is that the Mills Act is written in a subjective kind of language. And the structure of the proposed ordinance is written to be as objective as possible.
Does the Mills Act in state law allow for any latitude for a city? I don't know how to express that. So if there's things unique to Los Altos that would influence how we write our code, would that be allowable to the state, or do they want it to just be copy paste from theirs?
No, there's kind of administrative and process related components of the ordinance, which a city can kind of add on to, subtract, so on and so forth. It's kind of they've created the base for us to be able to go on.
Okay. Catherine Clever? Did I get that right at all?
Yeah, Clairvaux. I knew you were gonna call me. I just wanted to say that I support clarity in codes, but also want to remind everyone that not all the properties that are in Mills Act are the same. We have a barn, and we went through a lot of hoops to try to get the barn in the historic registry so that we could restore it, because we love it. It has no running water, it has no plumbing. And our assessed value in the past 2 years has gone up 55% on the barn. So we couldn't even rent it as a living structure. So it sits outside of a lot of what the other homes are having, but we still have to incur that cost on top of all the money we put into lifting it up to be able to put in a sound foundation and doing extensive renovation work just to preserve something from falling apart. And I do think that we don't have as many gems. I think I might be the 16th Mills Act person, but they're very rare, and we see houses and big trees taken down all the time. And it's a real honor for us to have this property. It does cost a lot of money for upkeep for these things, and I appreciate the work you guys do. Clarity, streamlining, anything you guys can do to make it easier for people to restore their properties, I think is great, and putting that in code in a clear way. These people all know more than I do about the languaging of it, but I support it. And again, thank you. We love our barn. There are no animals. There's no one living in it, but it's fantastic. And
Somebody's not all. Thank you. Nathan.
Well, I'm Acorn Cooley or Nick Cooley. I am one of this gang apparently. I fully support the clarification and turning this into an ordinance. Mills Act is very complicated. I've purchased the house that was already in the Mills Act, and understanding it was very difficult. However, when we started to look into the wording of the ordinance, it became clear that there were quite a number of differences between the current contracts that are on houses already versus, what the ordinance said. And the current practice versus what the ordinance was saying. I think the current practice has to do with the state law. I'm not quite clear on that. And we're concerned mainly that, it makes it more difficult for new Mills Act applicants to become, Mills Acts. My understanding is that existing Mills Act, homeowners are, their contracts will be changed, so this just means that there will be differences between existing contracts and contracts that are happening in the future, which seems like something that makes it even more complicated, and that seems like a problem. And there's also a number of issues that we have. For example, the contract, the law states that the contract can be changed at any time, which wasn't true in the past, and doesn't seem fair to people who have agreed that they're not going to tear their house down and that they're going to maintain a historic house, in exchange for, partial, tax break to, partially offset the cost of maintaining the house. And there are a number of other things which have been submitted by Jeff Bear, but have not been incorporated into the, wording, I understand. And we urge you to request that those be reviewed. Some of them were rejected because they're not, they don't conform with state law, but I think that's true for some of our suggestions, but not all of them. And I urge you to request that get reviewed again. Thank you very much.
Mr. Joyce, do you have any comment?
I'll opine on that the proposed ordinance does differ from, the majority of Mills Act contracts, because every single Mills Act contract is a little bit different, which is one of the main reasons why the two flavors of the kind of Mills Act agreements that are circulating between the multiple properties that have them, they should be consistent because, they're participating in the same program, which is again, what we've mentioned multiple times tonight and even in public comments is that, only having it in state law or relying on state law leads it to a very subjective interpretation of subjective law. So it's, it behooves us to have consistency, for our code.
And this discrepancy between the previously enacted contracts and what's going to happen going forward, we'll have to deal with that on a one, just individual basis, or
Is there no move to standardize the contract?
I mean,
Nobody has any urge to do that?
if that was something that in the future was a part of a mutually agreed upon discussion between the city and the current contract holders. Again, it's a contract, so it's mutually agreed upon. So if that were to be something,
The city has no power to suggest that we could be a change?
it does in a part of the draft ordinance, which is an amendment clause. So I can tell you how it normally happens in other jurisdictions. If the jurisdiction comes in heavy-handed and cancels contracts, which then triggers a potential reassessment. Well, it's not even the cancellation. They issue non-renewal notices. And then as a part of that, then it's the Mills Act owners then in other jurisdictions will then start to negotiate a new contract that comes into full compliance. The amendment clause that's included in the draft ordinance prevents us from having to go through the whole process, and kind of just gets to keep in place what is there and then provides a mechanism to tweak certain provisions that are in conflict.
and that could be triggered either by the homeowner or the city?
So, I mean, obviously, I think the city would probably be the only one to request some amendments. But yes.
Duco,
You can see the ones that do.
okay,
Yes.
clear.
Good evening. My name is Kurt Ripple. I'm an elected director of the Minnesota Open Space District, so I'm sharing my comments tonight as a private citizen. My wife and I live at 151 Hawthorne Avenue in Los Altos. We finished a 4.5-year rehabilitation of our 1922 Craftsman bungalow in August of 2024. We signed our Mills Act agreement with the city of Los Altos in March of 2023. On June 5th, I shared my concerns at the Planning Commission meeting about staff's changes to the Mills Act in Los Altos. I was appalled at the Planning Commission's lack of knowledge of the Mills Act and at staff not providing you, the Historical Commission, the opportunity to review and comment before the Planning Commission meeting. On June 17th, I participated in a community meeting of 14 Los Altos Mills Act property owners where we aligned on our recommended changes. We want to thank the city manager for intervening to more carefully consider our recommended changes and to allow the Historical Commission this evening's opportunity to review and comment. However, we recommend the Historical Commission comment the proposed changes to the Mills Act ordinance this evening needs more work. While the existing Mills Act property owners appreciate that our existing contracts will be exempt from any changes, we are very concerned the changes before you will make the Mills Act process unnecessarily complicated, drawn out, and expensive. This will result in fewer property owners considering the Mills Act option, and our opportunity will lose, and our community will lose more of our historic homes and structures. We believe this is an opportunity to provide more flexibility and clarity in the Mills Act process and requirements the city of Los Altos, and still will meet applicable state laws. Please recommend that staff take the time to better understand and incorporate the recommendations provided by the Mills Act property owners and ask for this item to come back to the Historical Commission for further comment and review before going to the city council. Thank you.
Question, you mentioned, some changes that were made to Mills Act that you initially said were, or when did that occur? Was there a cycle of Mills Act changes?
Staff made recommendations to the Planning Commission on June 5th.
Of this year?
Yes.
Okay, so we're still in this, it's not like there was a previous cycle that you're responding to.
Right.
Okay. Staff, any comment? Parents, sorry. I'm sorry on the name.
That's okay, it's okay, I'm Mr. Joseph. So my name is Karen Skusel. I live at 151 Hawthorne and I'm his wife. And I agree with the city moving the ordinance in the city code. My issue really is with primarily the content and the process. Like Kurt and some others, I'm very disappointed in the process that current Mills Act owners were not consulted, asked them what's working, what's not working, and get our advice. The first set of recommendations that went to the city council had all of our contracts changing. There was that meeting with a group of 4, and so that changed, so we get to keep our current contracts. But I, as many of my fellows, Los Altos, are concerned about the contracts going forward. I love Los Altos. We've lived here for 37 years. We bought our house specifically because it was a little home that looked like it was ignored and we wanted to rehabilitate it. It required some changes because it wasn't really livable for us going forward. The process was difficult. It was expensive. It was timely. It took a lot of time. And my concern is that with the changes as proposed, it will be a disincentive for other owners to preserve and restore and refurbish historic homes. I think having historic homes is part of what makes Los Altos special. They're a charming community, but the buildings and the structures are part of what make it special, and I'd like to see us continue that. So I would ask the commission to suggest to staff that they continue to work with us, to continue to refine. We believe that we can come up with solutions that are consistent with state law, but still provide administrative changes and processes that work well for our citizens so that we can retain these structures and keep Los Altos charming and special. Thank you. Thank you.
Jennifer Jacobson.
Jennifer Jacobson, it's exciting to talk to all of you today.
felt like it wasn't that long ago that we sat in front of the historic commission. It was 2 years ago, right when we were getting approvals for our home. And I remember the encouragement that the committee gave to us, that how important it was to preserve historic homes, how much they appreciated our responsibility, and we do feel like it is a responsibility to do this. We did leave feeling very empowered to do the right thing for the community and for preserving this home, which we had purchased because we fell in love with the charm and you know, we wanted something that was unique and in the city. So I do want to ask you to continue that enthusiasm that you expressed to many of us in the process, and to have a voice in this, and to be sure that your voice as the experts in historic homes is really heard, because as we've heard that, you know, this is a very nuanced, unusual place, and it's not something that most of the planning commission deals with, but you all do. So I think your opinion carries great weight, and would ask you to help make sure that that you listen to the feedback you hear, take it very seriously, and that we do ask to rework some of the things that we're in process of discussing, and that it does come back to you before any further. When we did our design process, it came to you all first, and I think that is the right place for where this should be considered. So I think we're probably the newest one on the Mills Act. I will say Nick and Sean and some of the team have been great to work with and really helped us get through it, but it is a challenging process, for sure. I mean, we're still seeing things as we're, you know, going through this that we can't do because of the historic nature of the home or because of the way it was built, and considerable cost too. And I've seen the beginning of that since last year, when for the first time they started putting fees on historic homes. Unfortunately, we had some changes to our permit that ended up costing us a lot of money for very small changes, because they charged for the first time and we were unaware of it. The city charged for permits, and it was $15,000. It was not a small amount for us that we were not planning. So we sort of seen kind of what can feel like a little less, more restrictions on historic homes, and this continues that. So I do want to make sure that we can, as many others have already commented, have open exchange, open communication, and work this together for the good of the community. It is, we are giving a gift to Los Altos. Yes, we do get some tax benefits. They do not cover the cost of what we're covering in terms of time, effort, or just costs. So I do want that to be appreciated and the considerations made for, you know, the process. So I would just ask for your support with all of the things you're doing today. And thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Christiane Lewis.
Hi, thanks. Thank you very much. I am owner at 965 Berry, Cyrus Berry Home. And with regards to having the historical Mills Act contracts be codified, it seems to make sense. I think that it's really important that as the city gathers their what their priorities are to put into the ordinance, that it would be something that would be supportive of the preservation and the spirit of trying to enable the homeowners to have those preservation works done, and still be manageable by the city, so it's not undue work on the city's part too, and to have that all reviewed. And if this is the body that should review that, that would be wonderful. We really appreciate it, and I'm not sure who else would be the voice that would say, yeah, this whole ordinance encompasses the spirit of the benefit of the city and the historic preservation of older homes. So, thank you.
Thank you. I'm Leslie Behar. I own 220 University Avenue. And I've owned it since 2017. When we bought, we had no idea what we were getting into. with respect to having a house in the Mills Act. What we have found is that we consider ourselves a steward of that property. And it's a tremendous amount of work and very gratifying. At first it was like, oh, isn't this great? We get this great tax break. But we have easily found we've gone the investment in keeping it up goes many times past that. I'd like to join with the gang in saying I appreciate the work and the thoughtfulness going into this. It's really complicated. And I would like to add my voice to saying, let's have more time to clarify it, simplify it, and make sure it's working for everybody. I'm learning even in here this evening that everybody else who's speaking has the same sense of commitment to our community and to the historic aspect of what we're all doing. And again, thank you.
I don't know. Am I missing anybody? No? Okay. Staff, did you have any final comments?
No.
No? Anyone else on? Okay. Well, it's been late. So let me just ask the, each of the commissioners if they have final thoughts. Then particularly as it pertains to our role of reviewing and commenting. And based on the input that we've gotten from staff and the input that we've gotten from the public, do you have any further comments that you'd like to read into the minutes at this point?
I think we should be advised of changes.
Okay.
And especially going forward, I think that if we need another meeting, that would be okay.
It's pretty important.
It's important.
Okay. Okay. So, it's been really informative. I feel like I have a much better understanding of where we are now and where we want to go, and less clear is how we're gonna get there. I guess my two comments are based on the idea that I think somebody mentioned that codification is tough, and that I don't think we're there yet. That would be my comment, in that it sounds to me like there have been discussions and staff has worked closely with some members of the gang. And there's been some really good work done in that area. I have the sense that more needs to be done, or more of that interaction, and I don't know how that happens. I don't know under what auspices that happens. I would appreciate it once this gets figured out of how this is gonna happen, and we get to a point where we have a solid set of set of verbiage in the ordinance. I would love to be invited back, as we were today, to provide comment from the historical commission. So I would ask that happens. And if needed during that continuance of the process of solidifying this language, if our system sees needed or wanted, we're more than happy to do that. And I think my colleagues and our missing colleagues would share in that. Sure. Okay. So I believe, we have one more thing. So there is the ordinance to repeal.
That's just an operative,
Just the operative.
ordinance, so that's.
We don't need to, you don't comment on that. Okay. But we take a peek at the agenda, there. So I officially closing public comment on these issues. There are a couple little things that we need to go through as the commission, that you're welcome to say your read, etc. Thank you very much for your input. Very much appreciate it. And we go forward.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so, are there any information on it? Technology and commission reports, the comment?
The only thing maybe, potential future.
Yeah, I would just go back, because I think.
So because of this agenda being so heavy, we moved an annual inspection kind of report in this meeting. I don't have any October meeting for each of them.
Okay, so we continue our review.
We can annual, every 5 years. I had that word down.
Okay. And then I am also aware that, the orchard and the trees is a subject of, and, I understand that, there are other areas within staff in the city that are addressing those issues currently.
Well, so only thing I know is on the agenda is not on the agenda, and I don't have any other information to really convey. If it needs to come back, if it needs to go on the agenda in the future, it will, and then we'll advise you about it.
Okay, yeah, I understand just from speaking with people that, involved in the orchard, that there is the matter of, the yearly culling of dead trees. And last year it came before us, the commission, to approve the removal of spot trees, because they were dead. And, as happens during the year, there are now some more trees that are dead that actually need to get out now. And so I'm not sure how to, if that should come onto our agenda.
So if the code requires the item to be heard by the commission, it'll be brought forward.
Okay, how does that happen? How does that?
Well, generally before an agenda is finalized, we usually reach out to the chair and we talk to the chair about it.
Okay. Okay, if we just make a mental note that we could address that before the next agenda comes out.
Correct, I can always reach out to you and let you know.
Okay, let's see. I know there's a larger issue of, continued maintenance and handling of the orchard, but that's a subject for further discussion. But this, the getting rid of the dead trees before they infect the other trees is kind of important. Or speaking. Okay, adjournment. So, Jeremy, I thank you all very, very much. Your help for me tonight has been inestimable. So, thank you. We're done.